So, ladies and gentlemen, the followers of our channel, I have a question for you. Look at the photo very closely. What do you see? Well, it's Guy Lafleur celebrating something. Well, in this case, it was a historic moment. You see him celebrating his 1,000th point during an NHL game in Montreal in the early 1980s. But look much closer. Guy is saluting the crowd, but in the background, there's a whole bunch of fans cheering him on. If one of them looks familiar and almost like a younger version of who you think it is, you're right. Mario Lemieux. Now, there's a whole story behind the photo, which is considered one of the most important vintage shots in NHL history. So today we'll be quoting from the National Post article, one of Canada's biggest newspaper print publications, that talks something about the details of the photo and some of the mystery of why it was finally found for a bigger audience some 30-some years after it was taken. Now, it is March 4th, 1981, and Guy Lafleur is standing at the Canadiens' bench, waving his gloved hand to thank the Montreal Forum crowd for its standing ovation. According to the published report, Lafleur just earned his 1,000th NHL point, scoring his 21st goal of the season, 54 seconds into the third on assist from Keith Acton and Larry Robinson, giving the Habs a 9-0 lead over the Jets in what would be a 9-3 victory. For the Flower, his 1,000th point had come as his 720th NHL game. He is the 13th player to have reached that magical plateau, and at the time, is the fastest to have arrived there. 20 games more quickly than Marcel Dion 2 months earlier. Now, the moment, captured on black and white film by award-winning Canadian press photographer Doug Ball, shows a joyful Lafleur flanked by teammates Denny Haron, Pierre Mondou, Pierre Laroche, Acton, and late Doug Wickenheiser. Behind them is our forum usherette, as we are known in the day, a Montreal cop, Canadiens assistant trainer Pierre Beaulieu, and head coach Claude Ruel. Back of them are dozens of fans on their feet cheering Lafleur in salute. And in this front row behind the bench on the aisle, of course, wearing a sports jacket and a very wide 1980s necktie, is 15-year-old Mario Lemieux, then a net-filling midget AAA player for the Montreal-Concordia who worshipped the ice on which Lafleur was skating. Now, Lemieux was not mentioned in the caption that Ball attached to his wire photo, an image that appeared in the Montreal Gazette the following day. Now, Super Mario DeBee was one of the thousands of Lafleur's adoring fans at the Forum that night. And in this photo, just another Star Trek-struck young man in the crowd who was witness to history. Now, the Montreal Gazette eventually published a tightly cropped vertical format version of this image the following morning, but look at the picture 3.5 decades later. A much more detailed, wider scope image discovered recently by its photographer, and so much about it is stunning. It is remarkable how the shot came to be, and how it has again come to light 34 years after Ball froze the scene on Tri-X film with his Nikon F2. Now, 34 years, the article came out in 2015. Now, of course, it's more in the 40-year level. Every morning, my Twitter account, the writer said, I post details of a few moments in the history of the Canadiens, illustrating each with a vintage photo, digital newspaper clipping, or video short. Now, on March 4th, Lafleur's 1,000th point was the second of 3 events I featured, including a microfilm archive story from the March 5th 81 Gazette, headline, Lafleur gets 1,000th point as Canadiens bomb Jets. Now, Ball's crop photo was displayed beneath the headline, within the game, a story written by the late Glenn Cole. Now, shortly after 8:30 a.m. in the morning, I tweeted this. Canadiens owner Jeff Molson emailed to ask whether I could send him the photo, presumably a better version than the grainy microfilm image I had posted. I replied we didn't have the original, a pre-digital hard copy which had been transmitted to our newsroom that night from CP offices in the Gazette, former Montreal Star, building on St. Antoine Street, using the laser photo wire technology of the time. No problem, Molson emailed back, explaining that a fan in the background was the father of a friend. And that's where the story ended. Until Twitter follower Jared Dix of South Porcupine, Ontario, then a 41-year-old Newfoundland-born second-generation Habs fan, tweeted me 3 days later, is that Mario Lemieux on street clothes. Molson hadn't noticed, but he had picked up Paul Marchand, the father of his future good friend Matthew. I had studied Lafleur, his teammate on the bench, and trainer Milieu in his CH crested tracksuit, and I never saw Lemieux. But upon reading the tweet of Dix, whose children love PK Subban and Carey Price, the discovery of Mario hit me like a bolt of lightning. Now, I immediately emailed a microfilm frame to Pittsburgh Penguins Communications VP Tom McMillan, who was in LA for the Penguins game that night against the Kings, and to the team's communications director Jennifer Bolano, who was home in Pittsburgh. Now, Lemieux, then the Pittsburgh Penguins owner, was in LA for the Kings unveiling that night of a statue celebrating the career of Luc Robitaille, the Montreal native Hall of Famer and a longtime Lemieux friend. Lemieux was vaguely aware of a photo that had celebrated Lafleur's 1,000th point and was keenly interested in it. The Penguin staff received it by email, meanwhile, and were blown away. It is a classic shot of hero worship, but it's much more than that. This is two superstars, one at an NHL milestone, the other having just finished his midget class season, bound to become a major junior sensation, and, in time, another one of the greatest players the game had ever seen. Now, Ball, now retired in Oakville, had sent me a gracious email in December about my coverage of Jean Beliveau's passing and funeral. With his address, I emailed Ball about his photo, and incredibly, he found a pristine, full-frame print of this image, which he had shot from across the forum ice in a walkway behind a row of fans at the glass. The fierce two rows behind the Canadiens' forum bench were Molson family seats, Senator Hartly Molson usually using a pair of his four, and Jeff Molson's father Eric and Eric's brother Stephen holding six behind the senator. Now, Molson Brewery owned the team at a time, and guests of the Molson family would be given these prime seats on occasion. Lemieux and the Montreal-Concordia teammate Jean Bourgeois, who was beside Mario in the photo, were ticket holders that famous night. It was Canadian GM Marc Bergevin, who would play on Montreal-Concordia the year after Lemieux left, who identified Bourgeois and a few others in the photo. Bergevin would join Lemieux in the NHL as a Penguins teammate in 2001 and from 2002 to 2004. Somehow, Mary was invited to that game, said Jeff Molson, who remembers family seats being distributed both by request and invitation. Lafleur has no special recollection of the night of the fan salute. When I put the print in front of the flower a week ago, he identified late Forum Vice President Gary Grundman and his wife standing directly behind Lemieux before he noted Mario. To the right of Lemieux and Bourgeois in the image are Paul Marchand and his son Matthew, who would become one of Jeff Molson's good friends. The boys didn't yet know each other, and Matthew, in fact, was cropped out of the photo. Nor does Lemieux exactly recall how he wound up at the Forum that night in the front row, no glass separating himself from Lafleur, his favorite player. Now, the Ville-Limon native was already a brilliant forward, scoring 62 goals and 62 assists in 47 games with midget Montreal-Concordia in 81, coached that season by current Canadiens assistant coach Clément Jaudoin. Among his teammates were Harbs assistant coach J.J. Daigneault and radio analyst Sergio Mamesso. Now, Lemieux would later join the Montreal base Laval-Voisson on a major junior level that fall, in 3 seasons scoring 247 goals with 315 assists in 200 games before becoming a supernatural force in the NHL with Pittsburgh. He is happily off the public radar today, choosing not to do interviews. But through McMillan, Lemieux recalls a few details of Lafleur's milestone night. Mario knew Guy had a chance at 1,000 points that night, but it was just happenstance that he got the tickets. He didn't request it, McMillan related, and he didn't meet Guy after the game. Nothing like that was arranged, he was just a fan of the game. It is incredible to me that a player besides Guy on the bench is Pierre LaRouche. Mary and Pierre didn't know each other at the time, but of course they had become longtime best friends. And LaRouche also lives in Pittsburgh. Now, Ball, a legend in Canadian photojournalism, who was a photo editor in the Gazette from 84-87, shot countless Canadiens games for Canadian press, and takes special delight that this frame of Lafleur and Lemieux has resurfaced. He recalls shooting Lafleur's 1,000 point with teenage CP freelancer Pierre Obendorf, today a veteran Montreal Gazette photographer, and opposite United Press Canada news agency rookie Ryan Riberos, today a longtime Montreal-based CP shooter. Obendorf took a wonderful shot, snapped from higher in the stands of Lafleur backhanding his historic goal past Dio, surrounded by Winnipeg's Dave Christian, former Hab Norm Dupont, and Dave Babbage. Now, playing for the Jets that night included Rick Dudley, today the Canadian Senior VP of Hockey Operations, wearing number 99, and Danny Jeffrey-O, the Boomer's son. Obendorf was 19, still in school, working the game for free, just to get my foot in the door. He had no idea of the history he would shoot and what he believes was his first NHL game. Doug didn't tell me anything except to shoot Lafleur anytime he got near the net. Oberndorf says today that game taught Ryan and myself an important lesson. Always read the game notes. In his 2005 book, Life on a Press Pass, written with his photographer brother Lynn, Ball recalls faking out rumors about going back to the office before game's end to shoot film and make prints for the wires, pressed by newspaper deadlines. Lafleur had a first-period goal and assists, up to 999 career points 9 minutes into the game, and Rimaros was keeping a wary eye on the CP veteran. Rimaros finally returned to the office of UPC to develop his film and get his game images on the wire. Ball having waited him out on the photo lounge beer fridge, and Ball was in his spot to snap Lafleur's 1,000 point, including a celebration shot with Acton and Gainey and an image of defenseman Robson handing the flower, his milestone puck. It's a story Rimaros tells on himself, Ball jokes in his book. The photographer will make prints now for Lemieux, Lafleur, the Canadiens, and Penguins. Both teams will have copies signed by both players to be sold at charity auctions. Today, the Penguins' Tom McMillan interestingly compares Ball's photo to another iconic hockey image of two legends. You know that famous pose photo of a very young Wayne Gretzky with Gordie Howe? He said, referring to the playful 1972 shot of Howe hooking the 10-year-old behind the early stick. This, Lafleur Lemieux, one could have a similar place in the history of hockey photography, except that it wasn't pose. It was pure and real. A teenager cheering his idol, discovered all these years later, is really amazing. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're a Mario fan, a Guy Lafleur fan, a Montreal Canadiens fan, this is for you. You know, it's an interesting time in Quebec sports where you had all these great players coming up, the Nordiques, and my old pal Alan Globinski, who is trying to get his book published in French, talking about his time in the Nordiques and minor hockey as an enforcer. He said Gilbert Perreault was the greatest francophone player of all time. A lot of people agree. But you can imagine where Guy Lafleur and Mario Lemieux and Jean Beliveau and Rocket Richard are in the top five. Holy frick, what a great time for Quebec sports from about 1945 to about 1986. All the players coming up and skating, Denis Savard as well, Cloutier, Bernier, Boudria, all the great francophone players, Marc Tardif, Goulet. To me, the great Perreault, Martin Robert, the greatest hockey players of all time are French. And here in one photo, you have literally 70 years of hockey encompassed in that photo. You know, Guy being a young player coming up, Mario, young player coming up. There is no better in hockey history than francophone hockey players. The Russians are a close second, but they had a chance to beat us in 1972, and they couldn't do it, ladies and gentlemen. So that's the story of the infamous and famous and legendary Lemieux Lafleur photo. If you like what we're doing here, we're into NHL Vintage, let us know with a like, comment, or subscribe. Bye!